Sorry. Good evening and welcome to this public hearing of the Charter Revision Commission. My name is Anita Laramont and I'm honored to serve on this commission. Our commission's mission is to look at ways to make city government more transparent and responsive, with a particular focus on the city's housing crisis. It is this commission's responsibility to review the entire charter and suggest changes to the voters' consideration. Only if voters agree to those changes at an election will any changes to the charter go into effect. I know that I speak for my fellow commissioners when I say that we are committed to hearing from a broad spectrum of New Yorkers and to pursuing the best ideas that we can find. This hearing is just one of many public hearings across every borough to hear ideas from experts, community leaders, elected officials, and indeed, any member of the public who wishes to testify. Importantly, this is an independent commission. In making our recommendations to the city's voters, we are bound only by our judgment and our values. We will pursue ideas regardless of who proposed them and regardless of who supports them. Joining me in this commission are 12 other commissioners. There's the chair, Richard Burry, Vice Chair Sharon Greenberger, Secretary Leila Borzog, Grace Bonilla, Shams DeBaron, Dr. Lisette Nieves, Anthony Richardson, Julie Samuels, Diane Savino, Paul Weisbrod, Valerie White, and Catherine Wild. Although, as I said, we will be considering the entire charter, the commission is looking in particular at our charter's approach to housing and planning. From my perspective, there really is no more important challenge for this body to take up. Our city is in the midst of a profound affordable crisis. For millions of low-income New Yorkers, housing costs are the central struggle of their lives. For millions more, especially low-income New Yorkers, our housing crisis severely limits where New Yorkers can live, what schools they can attend, how they get to work, and whether their families can even stay together. Our commission is also taking a close look at the problem of chronically low voter turnout in city elections. Although our city does have a vibrant civic life, we suffer from consistently low turnout in local elections. We are also particularly interested in how to ensure that nonprofit partners who provide really vital services for New Yorkers are paid on time for their work. The commission staff recently released a lengthy preliminary report summarizing what our commission has heard at public hearings thus far and identifying areas to explore going forward. That report is available at nyc.gov/charter. As the report reflects, your thoughtful testimony has driven and will continue to drive this process as it unfolds. Testimony on any topic is welcome at today's hearing. So let me just say a few words about how the hearing will unfold. We will generally hear from those who have attended this meeting in person before turning to virtual testimony. However, we have a few invited panelists who are joining us from around the country, and we will hear from them during the first part of our hearing today. Members of the public are asked to testify for no more than 3 minutes. We will call for testimony from 3 people at a time, followed by any questions from the commission. I'll ask commissioners to hold their questions until the entire panel has finished. If you wish to testify virtually, there's a form online. You can find it on the meeting page for this hearing. Go to nyc.gov/charter, click on the meetings tab, and select the Queen's hearing. We will also drop a link to the form in the chat. We will do our level best to hear from everyone who wishes to speak today. This meeting is scheduled to run until 8 p.m. In the event that we don't hear from you this evening, there are many more opportunities to submit testimony. This is but one of many public hearings that have been announced. You can visit nyc.gov/charter to find information about all of our public hearings. You can also submit written testimony to the commission by emailing chartertestimony@citycharter.nyc.gov. And if you cannot attend a hearing, each of the commission's hearings will be public, live streamed, and recorded for archival purposes. With that, let's get into our testimony. Our first testifier will be Councilmember Frank Morano, who is on Zoom.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today, Chairperson, members of the Commission, and fellow New Yorkers. As you mentioned, my name is Frank Morano, and I'm new to the City Council, but not new to the Charter Revision Commission process, especially not some of the electoral reform issues that you have focused on in the preliminary report. I've testified before this commission twice already in favor of nonpartisan elections with ranked choice voting, just as I've done before every single Charter Revision Commission that has existed in New York City since 2002. This is an issue I care deeply about because it's about making our city's democracy actually work for the people that live here. On April 29th of this year, I was elected to the New York City Council in a nonpartisan special election using ranked choice voting. No party labels, no backroom deals, just a group of candidates competing on ideas, character, and a record of public service. The result? An election that was clean, fair, efficient, and imagine this, actually representative of the voters, not the parties. And that's exactly how all of our municipal elections should be conducted. New York City is long overdue for a full embrace of nonpartisan elections with ranked choice voting, not just for special elections or temporary pilot programs, but across the board. This system is already working for us. It has for 30 years. We shouldn't stop halfway. We should finish the job. Let me be absolutely clear. Nonpartisan elections with ranked choice voting, the very method by which I was elected, are not radical. They're the gold standard for local democracy, and I'm not alone in thinking that. In fact, nearly every major city in the U.S. that uses ranked choice voting uses it in nonpartisan elections. San Francisco, Minneapolis, Oakland, Salt Lake City, the list goes on. And let's zoom out a bit more. Nearly every city in America with more than 1 million residents, Chicago, LA, Houston, Dallas, San Diego, uses nonpartisan elections. The only exception that I could find anyway, Philadelphia. And honestly, if you looked at how that's going, not very well. Nonpartisan elections are the norm, not the exception. They allow voters to focus on the person, not the party. They empower independence. They reduce toxic partisanship and restore the focus of local government to what it should be: competence, leadership, and public trust. And yet, in your preliminary report, you floated, I think, a dangerously confused alternative, so-called open primaries, as a counterproposal to true nonpartisan ranked choice elections. Let me channel my inner George Carlin here. Words matter. An open primary has a clear, well-established definition. Political parties still nominate their own candidates, but any voter can choose which party's primary to vote in. That's how it works in states like Texas, Georgia, and Alabama. And you know what those states tend to have in common? Some of the least representative, most gerrymandered, and ideologically extreme governments in the country. So when I see this commission use the term open primary to describe California's top two jungle primary, it's not just wrong, it's Orwellian. What you're describing is not an open primary. It's a nonpartisan primary with a top two runoff. Those are not the same thing, not even close. And California's top two system, it's been a disaster. In at least 4 documented cases, vote splitting led to deep blue districts ending up with 2 Republicans on the final ballot, or vice versa, completely disenfranchising the majority of voters. Why would we want to do that here? It also shuts out minor parties and independent voices. Why should a libertarian, a green, or a conservative have to outpoll 2 Democrats or 2 Republicans just to make the November ballot? That's not democracy. That's electoral Darwinism. Let's talk about cost and clarity. Ranked choice voting lets us settle elections, primaries in general, in one round. One. No runoffs, no second bites at the apple, no months-long campaign extensions or extra expenses, just one clean, decisive vote. That's good government. And contrary to what doomsayers claim, voters can handle it. In fact, they already do. Cities like San Francisco, Oakland, and Minneapolis, they've been using ranked choice voting for years in nonpartisan local elections. The sky hasn't fallen. In fact, voter participation has improved, and elections are more competitive and more civil. But above all, I beg you, be precise with the language of democracy. Stop calling a horse a cow just because they both eat grass. Using open primary to mean top two is a bait and switch, and voters deserve better. So here's my bottom line. Put real nonpartisan ranked choice elections, the same like I just had in April, on the ballot this November. Make one set of elections for New York City, not one set for specials and one set for generals. Don't water it down. Don't confuse voters. Don't let them need a decoder ring to figure out what system we're voting with today. Don't distort what works. Let's give New Yorkers a system where every vote counts, where no party has a monopoly, and where candidates rise on merit, not machinery. If we can trust New Yorkers to rank their choices for mayor in a special election, we can trust them to do it in every other election too. Let's be honest. If New Yorkers can navigate alternate side parking and the subway schedule, they can definitely handle ranked choice voting. Thank you. I apologize for going a little bit over my time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your testimony, Councilman. Next up is Raquel Santino.
Oh, hi, Commission members. I'm really excited to talk with you today. My name is Raquel Centeno. I am a postdoctoral scholar at the Caltech Center for Science, Society, and Policy. And I'm here to talk to you today about some research I've done with a few colleagues on the demobilizing effect of primary electoral institutions on particularly Asian American and Latino voters. So we use survey data that includes validated voter data to evaluate across different states the impact that closed versus open versus top two primary elections have on participation in general elections. And what we ultimately find is that closed partisan primaries are associated with lower levels of turnout in the general election for all groups of voters, all groups of racial groups of independent voters. But we argue that closed primaries actually have a larger impact on Asian American and Latino voters because we know from a lot of existing political science research that Asian American and Latino voters tend to identify as independents or non-party preference voters at higher rates than white and Black voters. And what that means is that in a city like New York City, where you have many immigrant communities, you have large numbers of especially young people from these populations, that essentially in a closed primary system, you are kind of probably mechanically reducing participation, of course, at the closed primary level, but that also can spill over into the general election, which could mean that part of why you might see lowered participation of especially these groups in a large general election is because people don't have this habit of turning out to vote in the primaries. So what we find and suggest in the paper is that a move from any kind of closed primary to something like an open primary, a top two or top four kind of primary, can result in positive gains in turnout for independent voters from these different groups. And that there could be additional benefits, particularly for these groups of voters, like Asian Americans, Latino voters, that tend to identify as independents. They may vote with a particular party, but they are not necessarily registered with that party, and because of that, are not engaged in elections in the same way. Of course, I want to note that this doesn't necessarily mean that this is a panacea for reducing any kinds of, disparities and turnout gaps or anything like that, but that, moving away from closed primaries can be one way to improve participation of a lot of these groups that historically have been underengaged or disengaged in these kinds of elections in the first place. I'm trying to keep to time. So that is kind of my initial sort of summary of the research that we've been doing and why we think that closed primaries are related with lower levels of turnout for these groups of voters, and why you as a commission might want to consider moving away from closed primaries.
Thank you so much. And I neglected to ask earlier if there were any questions. Okay. Thank you so much, Ms. Centeno. The next testimony is from John Caney. Please apologize if I mispronounced your name.
It's John Caney. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to comment today remotely. Appreciate that. And compliments to the commission and your staff on your preliminary report. My job is to read through stuff like this, and yours is particularly good. So kudos on that. My organization, Reinvent Albany, advocates for more transparent and accountable New York government. We have a staff of policy experts who have drafted and passed dozens of city and state bills, and we're frequently called upon by journalists and elected officials to help them decipher complicated public policy issues. So that preliminary staff report is excellent, and it emphasizes longstanding concerns about New York City's poor voter turnout, which the preceding two commenters did a great job discussing. the preliminary report identifies two basic interventions. One is even year elections, which are a very good idea and supported by enormous evidence, and some kind of open primaries. The commission report also notes that about 1 million New York City voters are unaffiliated and therefore can't vote in party primaries. So research by political scientists suggests that the two biggest factors that drive local election turnout is, one, whether the election's in an even year, which really matters because of federal elections, and two, how competitive a race is. Now, New York City rarely has a competitive Democratic primary and general election for citywide offices, and typically has low turnout for one or both. So today, reInvent Albany is here to urge you to place two charter changes on that have to do with elections on the ballot. First, even year elections, great idea. Don't need to get into details. Many have spoken to this. Second, we ask you to consider a vote once process, which Fair Vote calls single round RCV. And that consists of a single election using ranked choice voting and no primaries. Now, this would be a big change, but as the council member noted, this is what dozens of cities and local governments across the United States are already doing and have been doing. And ranked choice voting has really changed everything, the possibilities that New York has to do things that are more rational and logical. And the overwhelming logic of ranked choice voting is to hold one election and eliminate primaries. Turning eligible voters out once is pretty easy to do and far easier than turning them out twice. RCV elections guarantee a high level of competitiveness without splitting the vote. So that competitiveness is an attractive thing. Now, San Francisco, which we heard mentioned, uses general election RCV process with no primary, a vote once system. And they had voter turnout of 79% in their 2024 mayoral election. New York City's last mayoral election had 23% turnout, 79% versus 23%. Now, there's a lot of confounding factors that we could look at, but that shows you the magnitude of the difference between those different systems. Another plus to what we call vote once is that it could dilute the ability of a single issue independent expenditure. And those New York can't constrain. They're constitutionally protected by the Supreme Court now. To sway an election in a general election with only two candidates. You could easily have an IE come in and drop $10, $20 million to wreck a candidate on a single issue. And it's much harder to do that when you have a larger field in a ranked choice vote with large number of candidates. So for instance, San Francisco limits their field to 10. Now, vote once does not have to be nonpartisan. Candidates could list their political parties to help voters with more information about who they're voting for, because people do care about that, but it doesn't have to be. And of course, it would save a bundle to not have to have two elections. It would save $30 to $40 million to only have one. And some of that saving could be put towards encouraging people to vote in other forms. Now, can New York City do this through charter change? Probably not. But the charter has, the city's been doing things via charter change with the hope of getting the state to pass state laws that enable them with some success. And we think it's totally possible. Now, if that's too scary to have the single vote RCV vote once, we think you should look at semi-open primaries where anyone can vote in a primary of their choosing. Those are used in Massachusetts and were recently approved in Washington, D.C. Again, we think vote once makes a hell of a lot more sense and has all the upside. But if it's too politically bold, then semi-open primaries would give those 1 million unaffiliated voters a voice, which matters. Lastly, unrelated to this, we strongly support making Mayor's Office of Contract Services a full mayoral agency with robust powers. As your excellent report identifies, New York City's procurement process is seriously screwed up. It's something that we look at carefully And we'd like to see a strong MOX with robust authority to standardize procurement and get other agencies to get their act together. So thanks again, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions? Carl?
Yes, thank you very much for your testimony. You suggested that we support even year elections. As you know, we don't have the power in New York City to unilaterally establish even year elections. We need a state constitutional amendment. What is the advantage of making that charter change now without knowing in advance what the state legislature and the potential state constitutional amendment will do, or what conditions such an amendment might place on what New York City could do?
So it sends a strong signal politically to Albany that New York City voters support even year elections, and that will help get the charter change through the legislature. And then when the charter is before voters statewide, builds momentum for it to pass. So as a political precondition, it's very important. You're right, legally it's not, but politically it is. And it also keeps Albany from doing the old, you guys got to go first thing. So we think it's very important for New York City to put it through in the charter.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much. Next, we have Paul Johnson.
Well, first, I'd like to thank the committee and the state or the city of New York for taking a look at what I think is a very important issue. I was the mayor of the city of Phoenix. I am here to advocate for an open, nonpartisan primary. Ranked choice voting or top two to me are less important than opening the primary itself. I've run in both types of elections. I've run both in an open primary as well as in a closed primary. And I'll just give you a little bit of experience so that you can think about this. When you run in an open primary, basically as a candidate, it was a Democratic mayor and a Democratic council person. But when you go run, you get a voting list of every Republican, every Democrat, and every independent. You knock on their doors, you meet them, you hear people with differing points of view. When I became mayor, it was obvious to me that there was a connection between business and the ability to produce commerce and social programs. That connection made sense. But when you run in a partisan primary, whether it's a Republican primary or a Democratic primary, what happens is when you go get a voting list, you don't go get a list of every voter. You get a list only of those people who are in your party. And worse yet, you get a list of those people who turn out in a low turnout primary election. The result of that is that you end up with a much more skewed point of view, and it's problematic. It's problematic for a city to be able to operate because both of those things are important. What the two parties want you to believe is that either you have to be pro-business or you have to be pro-labor. You have to be pro-business or pro-education. You're pro-God or you're pro-human rights. The thing that I've seen in running in a nonpartisan primary is how can you be pro-business without being pro-education? How can you be pro-labor without being pro-business? And I don't buy into it for a second that God isn't pro-human rights. These things can be connected. And what you do is you give a much greater latitude to your elected officials to talk about issues as they're important and to find common ground between people, which help make our governments more popular. Again, I'd like to thank the committee for looking at this. Certainly, I think a lot of other cities and states follow New York, so I hope that you're successful in this measure.
Thank you so much for sharing your experience. Any questions for Mayor Johnson? No, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Okay, we're going to move to in-person testimonials, and maybe I'll sort of call up two people at a time, if that's okay. First, Cassandra Stewart and Kim Svoboda. And just so you're ready, after Cassandra and Kim will be Richard Fox and Bella Wang. Cassandra and Kim, thank you so much.
Good evening, members of the Charter Revision Commission. My name is Cassandra Stewart, and I'm a lead budget and policy analyst at the New York City Independent Budget Office, or IBO. IBO is a nonpartisan, independent government agency mandated by the New York City Charter. IBO's mission is to enhance public understanding of New York City's budget, public policy, and economy through independent analysis. Our vision is to empower New Yorkers to engage with their government and shape the future for their families and their communities, armed with budget and policy information that's accessible, transparent, and timely. This evening, I'd like to take the opportunity to present findings from an IBO report published in August 2024 on the topic of moving local elections from odd to even numbered years. While IBO itself does not take a position on this proposal, this is an example of the kind of work that IBO undertakes on behalf of stakeholders and members of the public. IBO conducted this analysis at the request of Citizens Union. IBO evaluated what the fiscal impact would be on New York City's budget if all local odd year elections were shifted to even numbered years alongside state and federal elections. For this analysis, IBO included the costs associated with primary and general elections, but omitted special elections as the timing and frequency of these are variable. There would be fiscal year savings of approximately $42 million every other year if the city held even year on-cycle local elections. IBO's analysis assumed that the cost to run elections in even years would not significantly change, as the infrastructure for conducting elections would already be in place and paid for in these years. IBO noted that there may be additional incidental costs, such as increased printing or other promotional materials, and there may also be costs related to operational challenges in handling larger volumes, such as ranked choice voting analysis. IBO calculated the 5-year average of election-related costs in fiscal years 2014, 16, 18, 20, and 22. Though these are even-numbered fiscal years, they each contain the cost for the November general election of the prior odd-numbered calendar year. For example, 2022 includes costs for the November 2021 general election. It should be noted that a given even-numbered fiscal year also contains the cost of primary elections in even-numbered calendar years. Total election-related costs for the past 5 odd-year elections range from $15 million in 2016 up to $63 million in 2022. The 5-year average of election costs for these years is $42 million. Even if IBO excludes 2016, for which there was only 1 primary election compared with 2 in most other years, the average for the other 4 years is $48 million. Put these costs into context, the Board of Elections has spent over $200 million per year in recent years, inclusive of standard operating costs and the cost to conduct elections. Standard operating costs account for the bulk of BOE expenditures and include, but aren't limited to, personal costs and other than personal costs. In terms of costs for elections, the cost of poll workers consistently comprises the largest share of election costs, while line items such as poll site furniture rentals and election day staff transportation have costs relatively less. Finally, IBO acknowledges that the timing of local elections is prescribed by the state constitution, and a change at the state level would be necessary to facilitate a shift to on-cycle election. Thank you for the opportunity to testify, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
I'm Kim Swoboda. I'm not an expert. I'm an artist. I'm a homemaker, live here in New York City. I'm a political independent and have been my entire voting life. I like to think of myself as a good citizen. I carry my food scraps out to the compost bin. I pick up after my dog. I pick up after other people's dogs if necessary. And I do volunteer work. I recently retired from a not-for-profit organization that works with inner city youth. I believe in civic responsibility. So not being able to vote in a primary election because I'm an independent feels like I'm being stopped from participating in my civic responsibility. For the last 38 years, since I've lived in New York, I've been shut out of voting in primary elections. I'm not a newcomer to supporting open primaries. I've worked on the issue in the past. I have petitioned and I've campaigned. Today, I feel it's urgent. Now, more and more eligible voters are not registering in the party And I believe every citizen has the right and should be able to vote in every election. And I urge the commission to act now and put open primaries in front of voters. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for Ms. Stewart or Ms. Svoboda?
Thank you both for your testimony. Ms. Stewart, you were citing that the Board of Elections spends around 200 million a year, and that the savings from shifting to even year would be around 42 million. Is there any evidence or anything in your report that suggests that the switch would also, there would be other savings and as it relates to, you know, what the Board of Elections normally, I know you said personnel is a lot, but the idea of moving it to even, are there exponential that you're not, I don't know if your report speaks to that or not.
Our report strictly looked at the costs to conduct elections. It didn't account for costs related to, say, running the borough-based offices. There are offices in each borough. So there might be, but our analysis did not account for that.
Thank you. And Ms. Stewart, I assume that there's no difference financially in aligning with gubernatorial elections versus presidential elections. Is there any difference that we should be aware of?
No.
Any further questions? Thank you both so much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next, I'd invite Richard Fox and Bella Wang. And just so they're aware, the next folks will be Michelle Jackson and Candace Prince Modeste.
Thank you. My name is Bella Wong. I'm with the League of Women Voters of the City of New York. I just want to say that I appreciate the opportunity from all of the commissioners here today to just submit testimony on your preliminary report, which I found very interesting. So as a multi-issue, nonpartisan political organization of over a century, the League of Women Voters of New York City encourages informed and active citizen participation in government. It works to increase understanding of major policy issues and influences public policy through advocacy and education. I've been volunteering here for almost a decade at this point, which is very wild. So we read your preliminary report with interest. We submitted written testimony in the last round around ranked choice voting and around even year elections. Given the focus in the preliminary report on even year elections, I just wanted to dig into a few things that I think people have testified pretty thoroughly around most of the usual advantages, but we wanted to highlight a few things around accessibility and access for people in the city. So people even this evening have already talked about the turnout problem in New York City and the effect on local election or on our local elections from moving from odd to even years, as well as the cost savings. But a few things we would like to highlight. First of all, we believe that it will generally promote a more inclusive and representative electorate, benefiting communities of color, young voters, as well as there's actually some evidence from the research that it might give more voice to renters as well as homeowners, which is definitely a balance of voice and representation that's very active in the city. We're obviously very diverse as well. Secondly, from an accessibility standpoint, moving the election timing would ensure compliance with HAVA, the Help America Vote Act, which is a federal law on ballot access. It guarantees certain ballot access protections to voters in federal elections, which then extends to any concurrent elections that are happening at state and local level. That means that these protections are not guaranteed in non-federal elections. So putting our local elections in even years would put it under the HAVA umbrella, which I think as we've seen with political developments lately, it's very important to protect things with existing federal laws whenever we can. Also, I think a thing that we are interested in is ensuring that voter education is covered. Voters experience election fatigue with constant elections, and we do think it's important when voters are really tapped in during even years to take advantage of that time to educate on local as well as federal and state level issues. Lastly, I want to note a little bit around the how to actually get this as a ballot question. Again, from an accessibility standpoint, we realize, as people have mentioned, that the necessity of lining up the local and state elections makes this a little bit tricky. We are really dedicated to voter education and making sure that, should this ballot item be up, that we're in support and really clear to our communities around, essentially, this is a part, it's a necessary but not complete part of the puzzle. And we really urge the commission, when you're thinking about how to phrase it, to make sure that you phrase it in a way that's very, very clear for voters. Voters are pretty smart on average. You know, we feel confident in them, but we want to make sure there aren't excessive double negatives in the wording, so that's very clear. And lastly, I'll just note, as a side note, we are currently studying the issue of nonpartisan primaries. So we look forward to coming back with our conclusions later in the year. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Fox?
Hi, thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Richard Fox. I'm an open primaries volunteer and a Brooklyn resident, testifying to suggest that New York City adopt nonpartisan primary elections to the city charter through a ballot proposal in November. Currently, voters not registered with the party have no say in the choice of candidates that go to general election. They are entirely blocked out of the primary election, and the nonpartisan primary system allows all voters, regardless of party affiliation, to participate, selecting the candidates who will best represent their interests. This change would increase voter turnout and ensure a more representative and inclusive process. So some reasons why nonpartisan primaries are necessary. They would lead to majority support for winning candidates. Nonpartisan primaries allow candidates to reflect the preferences of the broader electorate rather than appealing solely to party members, ultimately leading to a more diverse and well-rounded candidates. It also combats the issue of a spoiler candidate to ensure that no vote is wasted. Second point, it encourages positive campaigning. Candidates will be incentivized to appeal to a broader range of voters, fostering a more civil and constructive electoral environment. Third, it increases voter participation. Nonpartisan primaries would allow voters, including voters not registered with the party, to have a say in the selection of candidates, leading to greater voter engagement and a broader electorate. And lastly, a reduction of polarization. Holding nonpartisan primaries would force candidates to appeal to a wider range of voters, and this can help reduce partisan divisions and foster more collaboration, civility, and bipartisan cooperation. By adopting nonpartisan primaries, New York City can build on the success of ranked choice voting and ensure that our primaries are more representative of the will of the people. In addition, by adopting nonpartisan primaries, we can foster a political environment where voters' voices are heard and the election process becomes more reflective of our collective values. This legislation represents a crucial step towards enhancing democracy, fostering voter engagement, and promoting fairer, more representative elections. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Ms. Wong, I have a question. You mentioned research showing that even your elections would lead to a more inclusive electorate, including giving greater voice to renters. Can you just speak more to that evidence?
Yeah, so I think overall, right, we know that we talk about lower turnout, right? But lower turnout is not spread equally across the population. We know in general, more privileged populations, white, older, homeowners, that kind of thing, are simply more likely to vote in all of these elections. You know, we were looking at the history of why elections are currently on odd years, and the thought was, well, if we split them up, we'll make sure that people get every issue with its chance to time to shine. We'll be able to have more time and focus on these issues. But what we've actually been finding is that the media market is disintegrating before our eyes, that it's very hard to get local news, and that younger and less privileged voters are simply less likely to be learning in the first place about these issues. So basically, anytime you have turnout go up, you're more likely to have a representative electorate. And that has a lot of downstream impacts, we think, on everything from how we handle the budget to education, all kinds of other issues.
And you spoke to this, I think, just incidentally in your answer, but we've heard some testimony, there are some concerns that with even your election, that might lead to less attention to local election, local issues, because it would be dominated by the statewide or national elections. Can you speak a little bit more about your perspective on that objection?
Yeah, sure. So it's interesting, right? Because I think Citizens Union will say, you know, that was why they supported the switch back in the old progressive era days, right? And it just didn't pan out. When we did our study, we did a little bit of a review of, the New York Times and other kind of major local newspapers. How much coverage did they have of city council races? Comparing that to coverage of, for example, assembly races, which also tend to be somewhat lower profile, and sort of during the even year equivalent. And it was kind of the same, right? All of the attention went to the mayoral, and a much larger portion went to presidential federal elections. But when we think about city council elections, assembly elections, that's something where we believe that the attention on the election in the first place, the boost from that level of natural intention increase, frankly, probably just outweighs the loss of attention to the city council race, because frankly, neither assembly races nor city council races were getting covered in the first place, which is a shame. But I think a little bit out of the scope of this particular ballot question.
Thank you so much. Any question? Thank you.
I had a question that related to what we heard previously about, advocating for either single round ranked choice voting or open primaries, which are different things. And you talked about open primaries. And can you at all give us some sense of why you think that that's preferable to a single round?
So I actually was advocating for nonpartisan primaries. Open Primaries is the organization that I'm with. So I'm advocating for nonpartisan primaries. So that would mean that just all different parties, independents can all vote in one election. This doesn't specify whether it will be only one election. It could be primaries in general. Personally, I think one election would be better, as gentlemen before mentioned. But nonpartisan would be the route to go. I think open primaries would, obviously that's the organization name, but as a policy, open primaries is different. I don't think that would go as well as nonpartisan. Thank you.
Hi, thank you both for your testimony. Ms. Wang, correct? Well, sorry. Thank you for your explanation in response to Chair Bureau's question about the even year and the anecdotal evidence for more inclusivity, not just racially and gender, but renters versus homeowners. I don't know, and if this was in your prior testimony, forgive me, I don't know if you have any specific statistics on that could be helpful in us looking at this. You also mentioned that you're in the process of doing a non-affiliate open primary, whatever the term is, or looking at all the other options. When you do that analysis, if you can also include any statistics as it relates to more diversity and participation, that would be helpful as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we did some research and we spoke to I forgot her name, unfortunately. I'm going to send that to you afterwards. But there is a researcher at Berkeley who was looking at school board election timing in California, because they've got a useful kind of research position, because they don't regulate whether school boards happen even in odd years. And there's been a fair amount of movement in California among those school boards where some localities have been switching, right? So there's some ability to actually track that in a way that's reasonably tractable with the data, and therefore being less anecdotal. What they found particularly was that the Latino share of voters increases by about 6% during even years. Asian share increases by a couple of percentage points. The share of younger Americans almost doubles in presidential years, and there's a modest increase in renters. This particular effect also was noted in that paper to increase particularly in regions with a very diverse population, which is pretty much what you see here. So, for example, we found in New York City, when we were looking at just the numbers, districts that have over 90% minority populations have turnout increases of an average of 232% in even year elections compared to odd years. And so, in recent presidential cycles, that means that turnout among younger voters ends up being something like 60%. Obviously, it's just way huger than it is for just overall turnout for odd years. And again, because the increase is so much larger for those particular populations, you see them just naturally having a larger vote share.
Thank you. And you said that research is detailed in your written testimony.
Yes, and I can
Okay.
email you all the name of the paper.
Thank
yeah.
you.
Thank you so
And
much.
again, when you look at the open primaries,
Oh,
nonpartisan
yes.
primaries, semi-open, whatever it is that you're looking at, hopefully all of them, you could include any.
Yes,
other
we're looking at it right
data
now.
that could support.
Yeah, well, we're happy to circle back. I think we have a sort of grassroots concurrence process that we do,
Right.
so it's currently going through our membership right now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next testimony will be, thank you. Any further questions? Thank you so much for your testimony. Deeply appreciate it. Next, we'll hear from Michelle Jackson and Candace Prince Modeste. So that they are ready, they'll be followed by Janet Witten and Elise Mendel.
Hi, good evening. My name is Michelle Jackson. I'm the Executive Director of the Human Services Council. Thank you so much to the Commission for having me back for another opportunity to testify about issues important to the nonprofit human services sector. As the Director of the Human Services Council, we represent over 180 human services nonprofits in New York City and state. And one of our primary issues is around procurement reform, as many of our members, well, all of my members contract with the city and state to provide essential life-saving services. I was really thrilled to see nonprofit procurement and payment as part of the Commission's preliminary report. I've been testifying at Commission since 2008. And this is the first time we ever made it past the first hurdle. So I'm really grateful for the attention that this commission is paying to this issue. And while systems changes like HHS Accelerator and Passport have improved certain structures in nonprofit contracting, payment delays persist despite changes in administration and engagement of the nonprofit sector. While there are many pathways that could lead to reform, I want to focus my testimony on two issues: making MOCS a charter, an agency in the charter, and also empowering the PPB to be required to have public meetings to help with their authority. The charter, as is in the preliminary report, should establish a mandate describing the specific responsibilities for MOCS. It's crucial for MOCS to have charter authority. Having one unified agency that deals with all of contracting, similar to OMB that deals with all financials and budgeting, would be remarkably helpful, as we see different city agencies have different approaches to invoicing and claiming. They get to have a little bit of interpretation, deputy mayors change, who oversees those agencies changes. So that would be really important. The Procurement Policy Board is also a really important vehicle for the public and for city council, controller, and the mayor to have some sort of authority or convening around procurement rules. And they often do not have public meetings. And sometimes those public meetings are about one specific issue. So there's not a lot of opportunity for the public to weigh in. And they could also be a really good check on a charter level agency like the Mayor's Office of Contract Services to be able to address issues if the public or the nonprofit sector felt that MOCS wasn't doing everything that needed to be done. I'll end my testimony by just saying, one, we do know that the city council and the mayor have announced recent initiatives. I'm happy to answer questions about them, but we don't know that those pieces of legislation will pass. And we don't know that that future administration will adhere to standard advance policies and things like that. And since I last testified, the data shows that things have gotten worse, with over 865 million in just unpaid invoices to the sector and delays across all of the human services agencies. So it is even more urgent than it was a couple months ago for the charter to submit some recommendations, and HSC would be happy to answer questions about that. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Please continue. Thank you so much.
Check. Okay, awesome. Good evening, everyone. My name is Candace Prince Modest, and I'm speaking tonight in my capacity as president of the Jamaica branch NAACP. I join you this evening to express my deep concern and distrust in the proposal to introduce open primaries in New York City elections. As a representative of a local arm of the nation's oldest and most impactful civil rights organization, my concern primarily focuses on the potential for open primaries to dilute the Black vote in New York City. Black people make up roughly 23% of the population of New York City, and Black voters in New York City are overwhelmingly registered Democrats. We have been increasingly recognized as the base of the Democratic Party. Black-led organizations and their diverse allies have fought tirelessly to build political power and equity within the Democratic Party. And in this current political climate, it's difficult to ignore the suspicion that open primaries is a proposal designed merely to weaken or roll back the advances that we have made, ultimately allowing for greater infusion of special interest involvement in our local races. Am I being paranoid? Maybe a little. But as a Black woman who constantly has to justify her desire to take up space among others in our modern society, I hope you can understand why. I am all for efforts to expand voter access and increase voter participation, but at what cost? With so many different primary models to choose from, how will this commission determine which one will best serve New York City voters? How will the commission ensure that this effort does not dilute the voting strength of Black voters and other groups? How will the commission convince New Yorkers that voters with no vested interest in the policy platforms of a particular party be given the power to help elect the leaders of that party? I look forward to continuing this discussion and hope that this commission heeds the opinions and preferences shared here today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you so much. Are there any questions for either Ms. Jackson or Ms. Prince-Modell?
Thank you, Ms. Jackson, for testifying. I have a quick question. There's been implications to around whether making MOX a charter of commission agency would create any confusion around the PPV and the responsibilities of MOX. Do you agree? And what would you say would be the division of responsibilities among these two entities?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for the question. I don't think there's confusion. There's certainly overlap, which is something we see often in city government. And I think checks and balances are a good thing for there to be shared responsibility and oversight. The Procurement Policy Board is really designed to deal with procurement, which is how do we do competitive bids? How are we, structuring oversight on the bidding process and who receives contracts? Whereas MOX is really responsible for the day-to-day invoicing. The PPB does not have a role, especially on a daily basis, or even, within its mandate to tell city agencies how to submit budgets or how to implement something like the cost of living adjustment that human services workers got. And so there really is a division of Procurement Policy Board does a wonderful set of work that does influence and mandate MOX to have certain responsibilities in terms of procurement. But on the flip side, MOX does all the invoicing, auditing, all of those kind of daily insights. And so there's certainly a division of those two responsibilities. And the PPB does have an oversight role if MOX were to overstep or not implement rules that the public saw as satisfying.
And as a follow-up question, your testimony pointed to the fact that things are worse right now and that the sector is getting paid at even lesser rate than even last time you testified. If MOX were a charter agency today, how do you think that would be different?
Well, one of the things, so I'm using data from the recent controller report, just, I didn't do this myself. And they found that in 8 agencies, it's kind of the worst it's ever been, or they are seeing, more delays than they were at this time last year. And those agencies include HPD, which is not under the Deputy Mayor for Health and Human Services, but is under the Deputy Mayor for Housing, Small Business Services, which is under the Mayor's Office of Operations, and DYCD is under the Deputy Mayor for Strategic Initiatives and not Health and Human Services. The next mayor will divvy up the agencies in a different way to different deputy mayors. And so there isn't cohesion among who has authority amongst deputy mayors to be able to implement something across the system. So MOX today could say, we're streamlining invoicing. We're doing it this way. We're going to establish a SWAT team to come in and, clear the backlog. We're going to register contracts this way. We're going to open renewals this way. And by having that authority, similar to OMB tells people how to submit their money to them, MOX would be able to say across deputy mayors and across agencies, the ways in which things could work. And ideally, and I think especially in the current administration, I think that would be remarkably helpful for there to be one agency really dictating those processes.
Thank you. Just a follow-up on those questions. I mean, doesn't MOX have that power today? I mean, both MOX and the Procurement Board are effectively under the control of the mayor, correct?
Well, the Procurement Policy Board is a quasi under the control of the mayor, right? So there's appointees from the mayor's office and from the mayor and the controller, but MOC certainly is, but it only has the authorities that the mayor establishes. Whereas by having it be a charter, an agency in the charter, it would have clearer authority. And, the next mayor could decide that there shouldn't be a MOC. So when we think beyond this administration and
Well,
to administration's
I
path.
mean, no mayor has decided that there shouldn't be a MOX, and isn't the failures so far of MOX or the lack of exercise of its powers really within the jurisdiction, power and responsibility of the mayor, whoever the mayor is, to address? And I mean, one of my concerns is just looking at the history of procurement, which is as you say, a very sad history in the city, going back several mayors. Sometimes the more we require, the more problems we create.
So certainly I think systems are only as good as the people behind them. And so I in no way think that establishing MOX as an agency is going to be like the sunshine and rainbows of the procurement reform system. What I would say is, from my own experience, under Mayor Bloomberg, Deputy Mayor Linda Gibbs, the MOX, head of MOX, Marla Simpson, they worked very cohesively together and were able to establish HSF Accelerator. So just speaking in this very one specific ways, because they partnered and they were able to, where the MOX chair did not have authority to compel an agency to change the way they did billing and claiming or procurement, Deputy Mayor Gibbs agreed with the MOX director and they forced agencies to do that. Force maybe being a strong word, although I was in some of those rooms, maybe not maybe not strong enough word. And so this is something that hasn't been tried. The charter commissions have not picked up this as an issue. And so I think it's something that certainly should be tried. And I think it would create a more authority within MOX than, the agency level it has now. And I don't know that it creates like more barriers to success and would certainly allow a MOX, director more influence across the different human services agencies.
I guess my concern is, and you're sort of making my point, which is it's as good as the people behind it. And as you say, under Mayor Bloomberg and when Marla Simpson was the director, MOX functioned in a much better way. The problem with creating a charter change is it's not something to try. It becomes embedded in an effect in the constitution of the city, and it's becomes calcified. And isn't this principally a management issue as opposed to a structural issue?
Well, I would say it's a structural issue for sure. I mean, procurement, when we look at the size of the MOX budget, when we look at the staff, the staff of the MOX team and what they're charged with, all, the $1 billion worth of spending that New York City does, not just in human services, but across agencies, goes through MOX. That's very structural. And so the idea of having them outside of the human services issues that I complain about on the daily, having MOX as a charter embedded in our constitution would be a great thing for me, not something to just try, but because it is the essence of like how we procure goods and services in New York City. And so in a way, I almost think it's been an error of our charter to not include something like that of how we do all of the contracting and contracting documents, to have it embedded in the way that the city operates on a daily basis.
Yeah, you kind of answered everybody.
I think Commissioner Lemon will, we'll go down the line.
I had a question for the lady from the NAACP. We're very concerned about any impact that changing the nature of how elections are handled would be experienced by various populations here. And so, to hear you assert that this would, adversely impact, Black communities is concerning. And so I think it would be helpful to us if you had any data to support those claims, because we would very much want to see anything.
Absolutely, and I appreciate the request, or the question rather. I think that anytime we are venturing into anything newish, right, for us, looking at past experiences will always help to inform, but also listening to the people. And just in the short time that this has come up, anecdotally, the people don't understand it, they don't trust it, they don't like it. Does that necessarily mean that automatically it's not good for us? Not necessarily, but I would simply ask of this body to put in, and certainly just not on you all. I'm here as a partner, my colleagues around the city, around the state, quite honestly, are here as partners to help us find what works best for all of our communities. But also just keeping in mind that the concern is about the dilution of the Black vote. It has come up and it's going to continue to come up.
Hi, thank you both for your testimony. What also would be helpful is to see if there is a statistical movement for younger people, in particular, because you're in NAACP, right? Black people that are moving toward not a non-affiliation registration, because that's also, do you have sort of a natural dilution that's happening because of what's changing in society? If that's not an issue, that would, or if it is an issue, that would be good data for us to have.
Sure, I can definitely look on for both of those data points.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
How you doing? Thank you both for your testimony. Michelle, I just wanted to, because you everybody asked excellent questions and you kind of got to a lot of what was on my mind, so I appreciate that. I think just so I can have a understand, first I will ask if I'm pretty sure you got testimony written that you're gonna send with more of your suggestions. I'm gonna ask, do you think that this adoption from the charter level is going to help to streamline the process? And you're saying create sort of like a separate agency with more authority. Do you think that there's a way that this is going to sort of like streamline the processes to make sure that these things function? And also, does it still allow for checks and balances in the way that it should?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll answer the second part first, because I think there's the procurement policy board. Also, there's the city council who could pass, if MOX issues a directive and the city council doesn't agree with that directive, they could certainly legislate. I mean, we're seeing that right now in the sense that the mayor announced 50%-ish advances for next year. The council has legislation for 80% advances. So there's always going to be the check and balance of the city council and the controller, obviously, in terms of their oversight role, and then additionally the procurement policy board. And I think it would streamline things, because right now, the Mayor's Office of Contract Services, when they want to do something like standardized invoicing, they don't get to just say, this is how you should invoice. And, for a very specific example, nonprofits get their invoices rejected one at a time. And if you have $1 million invoice that you submit to the city and they find this is a true story, not the $1 million, but it's about 250,000, 92 cents difference on a receipt. The whole invoice was rejected and sent back for the nonprofit to correct that error. They did not get paid that 250 until that error had been corrected. The Mayor's Office of Contract Services wants to do, and it has issued a directive around partial payment. Pay the part of the invoice that is not contested, and then wait for the other piece. So the 92 cents, we'll, hold that for a while. They don't get to just issue that directive across agencies. They have to go to the different deputy mayors and the different agencies and negotiate that. And we have seen in the past, over the years, certain agencies have tried to opt out of some of those directives or say, but we're special, or we have a different way of doing this. And so MOX should have the authority to say, we're the ones who receive invoices and send them on to OMB. We should be able to have a uniform policy around things like that.
So clearly, that data that shows that this simple process, or it's not a simple process, but this process actually delays payments, which is the main issue, and causes sort of gridlock because you have to go through these other mechanisms. So I think someone was speaking to, one of the commissioners was speaking to, can that get handled on the mayor's side of things from that level, even if it's legislated through the city council, or does it require a charter?
Well, something like if the mayor and the city council agree on something like an invoice policy, although a lot of that will fall, MOX could do that now, but they have to go through the different city agencies and different deputy mayors. And so it depends on kind of like something around late payments really couldn't be legislated. It is a management issue, which is why having MOX as a level agency in the charter would allow for a clearer stream of who's in charge and management. And so in that sense, it streamlines the process. I don't know if that's your exact question, but there's, OMB still has an oversight role, legal still has an oversight role, Department of Investigation. So all of those things would still exist. And MOX, even as a charter level agency, wouldn't be able to usurp that. And the city council could certainly legislate around issues of accountability and oversight and kind of components of that whole process in terms of get it from the time you get a contract till the time you get audited. But MOX as an agency would have more authority to just streamline those processes.
Yes, again, thank you both for testifying. For Ms. Modest, we've heard some testimony suggesting that Black voters are still grappling with ranked choice voting and introducing another change at this time would only kind of compound that confusion. I noticed that you didn't take that position necessarily, but I would be interested to know what you think about that.
I appreciate that. As someone who, another hat, has worked as a ranked choice voting trainer, I push back against that notion. The evidence that I've seen does not suggest that any group of people have any particular hardship with understanding ranked choice voting. I understand where folks are coming from, but that's not the position that I take.
Thank you. Commissioner Wild, do you have any questions before I have a few others? But okay. A question for Ms. Prince Modest. Is that right? Prince Modest, thank you so much. Thank you for your testimony. One thing I just want to note is that as part of our analysis, one of the things that we are doing is trying to evaluate whether there are any evidence for the idea that any of the changes to the primary rules has had the effect of the dilution of the votes, dilution of Black vote, as I think is required for under the state voting rights law. So I appreciate you raising the issue, but again, I think as I said, I think we all want to make sure that the decisions here are driven by data. And, we all have reasons to be concerned about movement, but I think we can access that data. And so again, I'll just sort of repeat, to the extent that you have data that suggests that is the case, that would be helpful. One of the things I do want to clarify is, and I think one of the things that we're hearing is that there's a challenge with language because open primaries can be interpreted different ways. And so I just want to clarify your concern. Is your concern primarily with the idea that opening up a Democratic primary, for example, to non-registered Democrats would have a dilution of Black voting power, as opposed to having a single primary, not Democrat or Republican, but a single primary open to all voters? Is your objection to the former, the latter, or both?
So your first example, particularly because Black voters are overwhelmingly registered Democrat.
But so to clarify, the objection is not to having a single primary where anyone of any registration could vote, regardless of your primary or your party affiliation.
And I promise I'm not being difficult. The ultimate objection is to not dilute the Black vote. So any mechanism which would do that, whether on purpose or by accident, I personally, and obviously speaking for my organization, would not.
Yeah.
So again, I understand that there are lots of different models for open primaries, but certainly one that would allow voters who are not registered to a party to make decisions along with voters who are registered to that party, I believe would further dilute the power of the Black vote in New York City.
Thank you. Can I just ask it again? Because I just want to be clear for I think I, for one, would not be in favor of any rule that would dilute Black voting power. So I want to speak for my colleagues. I'm pretty sure
fair.
I the constituents are the same. And so that's why I want to get clear about different proposals which operate differently.
Right.
So I understand you to be saying that in a Democratic primary, in a world where we have today, a Democratic primary and a Republican primary, I understand you to have an objection to allowing non-Democrats to vote in a Democratic primary for fear that there could be all sorts of malfeasance interference with the operation of that primary. So I understand that objection.
Correct.
I'm asking about a different model, which would not have a Democratic primary or a Republican primary. It would simply be one, don't even call it a primary, just a first round of voting. where Democrats could vote in that first one, where the Republicans could vote, independents could vote, socialists could vote, conservatives could vote. Is your objection to that model? I understand that if it had, but do you, maybe put it differently, do you have a concern that that model would dilute Black voting power?
To an extent, simply because Black voters in New York City are affiliated voters. And so take it for what it is, but
But they can still
when you,
vote. in that-
no, understand that they can still vote, but when you, I'm worried that when you open it up to everybody, it creates the potential for the Black vote to get lost in the sauce. I'm sorry.
Okay.
I will, let me just be perfectly clear. I'm more familiar with the first example that you spoke about, more so than the second example. I think the first example is used where open primaries are used. I think that first example is used more widely across the country, but I do want to be able to come back to
I
you.
don't
with
know if that's
data.
necessarily the
Right?
case.
Mhm.
I don't know that that's the case,
Okay.
but I
I'm more
appreciate it.
familiar with
Thank you.
the first example. Yep.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Can I just follow up on the chairman's question? If I understand what you're saying, the first one, which is non-party people being able to vote in a party primary, is your greatest concern. You may have concerns about the others as well. Is that a fair?
That's exactly correct.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you both so much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Thank you. Next, Janet Wooden and Elise Mendel. Following them will be Caroline Denola and Karanjit Paul. And as always, forgive my generally terrible pronunciation. Apologize. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for giving us the chance to speak to you. And it's great to have heard, 15 erudite people speak before I have to speak. Anyway, I am Janet Wooten. I live in Manhattan. I am retired now. I had a career in public relations. I worked for Howard Rubenstein and his son Stephen. I have worked with
We'll forgive you for that.
I worked with many educational and cultural and civic institutions for years and years and years. So I'm an activist in the sense that I am a, rebellious independent and have been since I was 18 when I registered as an independent. Didn't even know what that meant, but it is who I am. And I'm here to tell you a couple of things that I've seen since I last sat before the Charter Revision Commission in 2003, when there was up for grabs. I think it was Mayor Bloomberg at that point, I think it was, who put it on the docket for consideration. And now, 22 years later, it seems like this time has come for something akin to letting everybody in the city vote in the primary process, since that in our town tends to be where the decisions get made. I had a couple of statistics I'm bringing to you that, Ms. White, I heard you speaking to the issue of young voters, and Ms. Laramont, I heard you speaking to the primary concern of housing and low voter turnout being the kind of focal points of this moment. And I think these stats speak to both of those issues. There, as I think one of our colleagues said earlier, there's now 1.1 million unaffiliated, non-party connected voters in New York City. But what's so stark is that close to 500,000 of them are younger than the age of 40. I'm grabbing these stats from the CFB voter analysis report. There was one in 22 and there was one in 24. So these are good stats. So half of the unaffiliated non-party people in this city are young. They're under 40. Okay, it's people in my age bracket who are voting. So the other stark statistic was that close to 55, it's 54.6% of primary voters were over the age of 50 And in the last election, the average age of voters in the primaries was 57. So you've got this confluence of all these young people coming in to register to vote. And then you have a lockout in terms of when they get there. I'm giving you an anecdote because I feel very passionately about this. I stood at the polls, as I often do, during the Obamas.
And thank you. I'm sorry, you're at time, but
Yeah.
you could just wrap up the thought.
I'm wrapping now.
Okay.
And I had to turn voters away who come out to vote for President Obama and could not vote because they were registered independents. That's not a way that we should continue. Thank you for the
so
chance
much.
to speak up.
Thank you so much.
Yep.
Hi, how are you?
Hi there. Okay, so first, thanks for the opportunity to testify. This is the first time I've ever done anything like this before in my life. And my name is, yes, and my name is Elise Mendel, and I live in Brooklyn, and I'm retired from CUNY. I worked there for 30 years, and I now work as an emotional development coach. And I've been an independent voter ever since I've registered to vote, like Dan here. I don't feel that having an allegiance to a party is helpful in supporting the growth of the American people. And I don't want to have to be affiliated with a party. I want to be affiliated with the American people. And I believe what's growthful is focusing on the issues and working to elect people that can make, what we need and what we want to make that happen. And I feel deeply that people deserve to get what they need to live a decent life. I'm gonna slow down, sorry. And that goes beyond party politics. And that part of what people need is a capacity to shape policies and programs in their city. And they need to be able to participate in every election. And here's the problem: my capacity to express my beliefs is totally blocked. In a city where, as was mentioned, the primaries are almost always determines the winner, I can't vote. And I'm locked out. And I worked for the city for 30 years, and all my taxes, were taken out, and I pay my taxes every year. And that supports elections that I can't participate in. So I feel this is a critical issue. And I'm one of those 1.1 million independent voters, in the city. And I think we have the right to vote in the elections. And again, especially when the primaries do really determine, who's going to be running in the general. And you have the power to do something about that. And you could put this issue on the ballot in November. And I think that's urgent for democracy. It's urgent for the betterment of the city. And I really believe in all New Yorkers have the right to vote and not have to join the party as a prerequisite to participate in democracy. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much. For your first time doing that, that was excellent.
Oh,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you so much.
Thanks. Any questions for the panelists? Thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Next, I'll invite Caroline Danola and Karanjeet Paul. You'll be followed by Alton Smith and Mike Pagariello.
Good evening. My name is Caroline Danola. I live in Bay Ridge in Brooklyn. I'm a freelance writer and editor, and I've been involved in supporting political reform efforts for more than 40 years of my life. And one of those issues I've been involved in is the issue of open primaries. I'm a native New Yorker, but I lived in California in the 2000s, early 2000s. And in 2010, I actually volunteered on the campaign for California Proposition 14, which was for top 2 primaries. At the time, I had a full-time job, busy job, but I believed in the cause, and I went into one of the campaign offices every Sunday for many months, and I called other independent voters By the way, in California, an independent voter was called declined to state. Now, we didn't really decline to state anything. We were independents. We were stating what we were. But in any event, that's an example of how independent voters often feel, that they don't even count. So we made the calls, and amazingly enough, that election was won. We won by 53% of the vote. Nobody thought it was going to be possible. There was a tremendous campaign and a lot of money to try to prevent it, but it passed. Well, now here I am back in New York. I moved back in 2011, which means although we succeeded in passing open primaries in California, I never got the benefit of it. I moved to New York City, where there was no such thing. It doesn't feel reasonable to me because I think New York City should be in the lead of doing more to improve our democracy, to broaden the number of people who participate. To me, the level of participation is the most important issue. The more people that vote, the more voices there are in politics. We all know, we've heard today that voter turnout is not good, and we all do know that when everyone can vote, more people participate, and that includes everybody. So in every community, there's a whole population of people who don't vote for all kinds of reasons. We need to give those people a reason to vote as well. Every year in my neighborhood, there are people petitioning to get candidates on the ballot, and they ask me to sign, and I can't sign a petition because I'm not a registered Democrat. I'm a registered independent. And when I say that to the petitioners, many of them are young people, and they're shocked to learn that we independents can't vote in every election. So I think it's time for New York City to catch up. I think we can't keep waiting for the perfect moment. This is the moment to open up the process to everybody. Thank you.
Despite your concerns, congratulations on making the wise choice to return to the correct.
Thank you.
Paul?
Thank you to the commission for the opportunity to share my voice today. My name is Karen Paul. I'm a volunteer for Veterans for All Voters. I proudly served as a Navy corpsman for 5 years and helped build out the Javits Center Hospital in the city during the height of the COVID-19 crisis. I was also raised right in Queens, about 2 blocks down there. And I've had the privilege of interning at the New York City's mayor office while pursuing my studies at John Jay College. I'm also one of the 1.1 million New Yorkers who identify as an independent voter, those who have chosen not to affiliate with any political party. Like many veterans, my sense of service did not end when I left the military. I still believe in giving back, just now in a different form. I see voting as one of the most essential responsibilities we have in a democracy. But here in New York City, that responsibility isn't fully respected because I'm an independent. I don't get a say in the election that often matter the most, the primaries. Nearly half, 49%, of New York City's independent voters are under the age of 40. Young voters aren't apathetic. We're either shut out of voting or opting out because the political system isn't working for us. The same is true for the military community as well. 55% of post 9/11 veterans identify as independents, yet we're locked out of the same elections we serve to protect, elections that other veterans have sacrificed their life for. In the military, I learned to work with people of every background. We didn't ask who you voted for, where you came from. We asked whether you showed up for each other. And I think these values are representative of how our democracy should work too. When we talk about open primaries, we aren't talking about weakening parties. We're talking about strengthening participation. We're talking about welcoming the voices of the next generation and the veterans and public servants who have already proven their commitment to our country. When is it ever acceptable to limit competition, whether in business, ideas, or elections? The answer is never, especially not in these United States. This is a practice we should no longer accept. New Yorkers deserve a system that reflects the city we serve, not one that shuts out over 1 million of us or forces the people of the city to align with candidates that they may not agree with in the future. I urge you to keep open primaries on the table for this November ballot because our democracy deserves it. We're not asking for anything special. We're just asking that New Yorkers have the right to vote however they see fit. Thank you.
Any questions for the panel? I do want to thank you, Mr. Paul, for your service to the country, you offer to our city during the difficult times. Deeply appreciate it. Thank you both for your testimony. Next, Alton Smith and Mike Tagariello, who will be followed by Kimberly Cruz and Shane Moynihan. Good to see you. Are you Alton or Mike? Can't wait to find. All right.
Hello, Richard, I'm Mike Tagariello, and I want to compliment you on pronouncing my name correctly. Thank you very much.
You have no idea how much anxiety I have.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Like a few other people here today, this is my first time speaking at a function of this sort, so I thank you very much for this time. I'm here with Veterans for All Voters, and I've lived in New York for 10 years. During that time, I vote early. Unfortunately, I vote early at the general election, and I'm an independent voter. So I have the curious experience of walking into the ballot box and seeing most of the decisions made for me already. So I really just want to highlight that feeling of doing that and understanding that a fraction of the voters in the city are making their decisions, and that just feels wrong. Like other people have said here today. No group should have any more say in the voting box than others. I feel that to my heart. And that is why I'm speaking here today. So I'm still going to vote early this year again in the general election. I hope that I can vote for this proposal to add partisan primaries to our voting here in New York. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Any questions? Thank you so much for your testimony. I appreciate it. Is Alton Smith here? Okay. Next we'll have Kimberly Cruz and Shane Moynihan.
Hello. Happy Memorial Month, happy Mother's Month, and my family's from Colombia, so la Sagrada Madre es muy importante para nosotros. Religion, spirit, everything is right now coming to us all as the United States of America was founded by Christian fathers who, Thomas Jefferson, he studied the Quran 11 years before he wrote the amazing living document that is getting destroyed in front of our eyes. So I wanted to start with this amazing little excerpt because we need to bring intellectual conversation to the spiritual world that we're in. And we're in a civil war, and the Soviet Union never really ended. And everyone is under attack, 195 nations, because we're letting our children's brain rot. Right now, federally, the same leaders that regulated the internet is regulating artificial intelligence. We have at the federal level, Senator Cruz, who carries my last name, saying that we in the United States did everything right. We did not. The internet, I was 8 years old, I was on MySpace. That is not okay. So now when the EU has had privacy data regulations, laws that we could also adopt and have civic conversations around, we're not doing it. We're focusing on primaries, which is what the bad yeast want. So I'm going to start with this. We have a finer body. The body which we see is the gross body. It's just like a shirt and a coat. Within the coat, there is a shirt, and within the shirt, there is a body. Similarly, the pure soul is covered by a shirt and a coat. The garments are the mind, intelligence, and false ego. False ego means the misconceptions that I matter, that I am a product of this material world. This misconception makes me localized. For example, because I've taken my birth in India, I think myself Indian. Because I've taken my birth in America, I think myself American. But as a pure soul, I am neither Indian nor American. I am a pure soul. These other designations, American, Indian, German, Englishman, cat, dog, bee, bat, man, or wife, These are all designations. In the spiritual consciousness, we become free from all such designations. That freedom is achieved when we are constantly in touch with the Supreme Spirit. So no matter what religion, what culture, what country, what your mother tongue is, if you speak Wolof, if you speak Spanish, if you speak Chinese, what's your Zhongwen, what's your Falasheng, Falasheng Shurwadaja, Megwo Shurwadaja. And this country, mi país, mi patria, es para todos. And so Colombia fell in 2022. Panama has fallen before because people, leaders in history have decided to go into people's homes and tell them what they should believe. And you are all amazing leaders up there, all intellectuals from my universities. Ivy Leaguers are going under because of our administration. So I got 5 seconds, but I would love a question because I'm a civilian that is intellectual and I'm tired of these disrespectful conversations of just focusing on primaries during the Civil War.
Thank you so much. Mr. Moynihan?
Hello. Thank you for having me. Thank you for coming to Queens. I live just down the block. I spoke to you, several of you, maybe all of you a couple months ago. I'll try not to rehash everything I said back then. I agree with what everybody here has said since I've gotten here 15 minutes ago about open primaries. I think everybody in the city should have a voice. I think closed primary system is extremely flawed. It's obvious that, people mention like, oh, maybe it determines, no, like we know it determines the election. We know that's what matters. But I don't want to belabor that. I came here today to reiterate that, but also to express my preference for the system of open primaries. If you were to choose to put one on the ballot, I know people in Common Cause, I saw John add one last week or a couple weeks ago, voiced the support for the top two system, which I don't agree with. Right now, we're gonna have a general election with, if Zoran doesn't win primary, he'll, probably him working families, Adams independent, Sliwa Republican, and Cuomo Democrats. We have 4. Why are we gonna trim that down to 2? Maybe, personally, I don't want Adams or Cuomo in the race at all, but let's say we had someone else that was good, Libertarian, Green Party. It's a very strong probability that a Democrat is going to make it and a Republican. Maybe 2 Democrats if they go hard on the dwarfs. But why are we going to block out that third person, that third option? Alaska has the top 4 system. It's fairly new, it's been used twice, but it's proven. They tried to tear it back. Alaskans came out and they reiterated like, no, we want freedom to choose who to vote for. We don't want to be told we have to identify with a party. So just use that system. If some of you have been thinking about the top 2 and leaning towards it, I think that will actually have the possibility to destroy the electoral reform movement, the open primary movement. It helps that it has ranked choice voting compared to California where it didn't, and put millions on his Republican candidate, and that gives a bad name too. But even with RCV, it's too restrictive, and just why? Thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for your testimony. Are there any questions for the panelists? No? Thank you so much for your testimony. Deeply appreciate it. Next,
Can I
we're gonna
just
have-
say one last thing? You are here in the
We have to
Queensboro
keep-
Hall,
we have to keep
and
the
we have
process up. We have to
immigrants
start-
that are getting hurt, and then healthcare system that is new type of slavery.
Ma'am, we have other people who want to testify. Thank you so much. We're gonna move on to the next Zoom testimony. First Levi Uchek Antaby and Maria Elena Giapina. Giampino, apologize. So Levi, Anthony, go first.
Good evening. How are you doing today? I wanted to bring up three issues with the ranked choice voting. Issue, I don't know if there'll be time for all of them tonight. I'll go with one and we'll see how much time we have. Issue number one is in most of the states that have ranked choice voting, they allow for ranking of all candidates. With only being able to rank 5 candidates, you do not have a full, complete say in who wins or who loses. The person who you want to win, the person who you want to lose, and it's not and the 50% that the person reaches at the end of the round is not a true 50% of the people. Why, Abby? That's issue one. So we should be able to rank all candidates. Any questions, or I should move on to number two?
Please continue. Hello?
Yes.
You can continue.
Okay. Issue number two, batch elimination. As far as I'm aware, I think New York City is the only place that has batch elimination. Batch elimination also takes away from the voters, for the voters' attention. You need, as far as I read from, I forgot from which side it was, from a law site that gave the rules of the ranked choice tabulation, is that in order to to do batch elimination rounds, you need to make sure that it's not possible for any candidate to be able to surpass the ones before them. But in order to do that, you need to be counting all choices, and not eliminating multiple candidates. So and in order to know where the vote goes after the next person, you need to do it one person at a time. And since I assume this has already been being done, unless the Board of Elections is lying to the public, just release that information. That's issue number two. Any questions, or should I continue?
Please continue.
Issue number three.
And I'm sorry, we're actually at time. Are there any questions for Mr. Anthony? No. Well, thank you so much for your testimony. Deeply appreciate it. Next, I'd like to invite Maria Elena Giampino. No. Okay. Next, Mr. Chad Peace.
Thank you, commissioners, for having me. First, I'd like to thank you for having this conversation. I think it's one of the most important that we could be having, despite maybe some other opinions. I'm Chad Peace. I've been the strategic advisor and counsel for the Independent Voter Project for 15 years. So again, I'd like to thank you for having a San Diegan come and testify. As the authors of California's Top 2, which has been pointed out by a number of folks, there are unintended consequences to a Top 2 nonpartisan system. One thing that I'd like to really focus on is the fundamental right that's at stake. Right now, our organization is actually advocating in California to move from a Top 2 to a Top 5 system to advance 5 candidates out. That's not because Top 2's not working. I know the council member that spoke before suggested that the Top 2 system in California has been a travesty, but then pointed to cities like Oakland and San Francisco as examples of good governance, I suppose. I think as a Californian, I would find that kind of interesting perspective. But what's most important to us is the fundamental right that is at stake, is that when you don't allow certain voters because they choose not to affiliate with a party to participate in the primary, which is a fundamentally important stage of the election, we're telling them that their vote is less meaningful. And to address the perspectives that have been presented by the NAACP, independent voters, for example, are largely minority voters, Black voters, Hispanic voters, Latino voters are in more numbers independents than they are in Democrats or Republicans in some states. And so but the point being that if we're going to have a fair election process to everybody, our first principle is that everybody ought to have the right to participate. And that when you're talking about an open primary, just as top two was opposed by both major parties, and the institutional forces may oppose open primaries are actually good for representatives in our view. And I think as the top two has been in play over time in California, you see that representatives actually feel like they can govern better. Some people may view nonpartisan reform as or advocating for independent voter rights as anti-party. I think it's actually the opposite, is that in the long run, the parties become more responsive to the electorate. They invite more voters in when they open their primaries. In fact, prior to our nonpartisan primary, California had a semi-open primary in which the Democratic Party allowed voters to participate and the Republicans disallowed. I don't think it's coincidental that the Democratic Party has succeeded in much greater in California, because they've invited non-members to participate in the process since the beginning. I think as the state as the whole should not look at opening the primary system as one, frankly, revolutionary, or two, have a negative effect on the process as a whole. But in fact, opening up and telling voters that we want. Okay, I apologize.
Are there
Thank
any
you.
questions for Mr. Peace? Really appreciate your testimony. Okay, next testimony is Gareth Ogle.
Hi, hello. Good evening. I apologize. I'm having trouble with my camera. I thought it worked, but now that I'm talking, it doesn't want to work. Nonetheless, my name is Gareth Ogle. I was born in Queens, raised in Brooklyn, and lived in New York City all of my life thus far, and I'm now 28 years old. I have 3 members of law enforcement, a part of my family, albeit they're all retired. And I'm here today to testify and ask the Charter Review Commission to adopt key reforms to give the Civilian Complaint Review Board real power to move New York City from symbolic oversight to real and effective accountability. As an everyday citizen, as a prosecutorial paralegal, previous prosecutorial paralegal, as a criminal defense paralegal, and as a paralegal / civil servant handling civil litigation, I know that this is necessary. As an everyday citizen, I watch officers, not all, but a significant amount, engage in excessive and brute force against vulnerable populations and demographics. I watch how they are able to seize an individual's bodily autonomy, how you'll have 3 sets of hands and bodies, officers, tackling one person who only has 2 arms and 2 legs. I see officers intentionally escalate interactions, then throw people to the ground, pressing citizens' faces and bodies to the filthy pavement. Then those very same officers hold themselves as heroes while they smirk and make disrespectful remarks with condescending tones. I see over time more policing with an ego as the norm and as an offset to safety. They fully understand in those smirks and in those comments and in their body language, they fully understand that there are no consequences nor recourse for citizens. As a paralegal in a prosecutorial role, I immediately became aware of the systemic advantage with which officers in law enforcement has immediate access to body worn camera footage and resourceful criminal justice databases. I would listen to how officers casually would disregard civilians' conditions in relation to poverty. And often some of the remarks that they would make that lets me know that they really don't care about public safety. A lot of the time, again, it's about their own ego and just getting a collar. And again, this is not all officers, but a significant amount. As a paralegal in the criminal defense capacity, I watch in how these interactions can have lasting and drastic effects in the lives of New Yorkers. And as a paralegal who handles civil litigation, I see how it is a burden that is passed on to the taxpayers of the city of New York through misconduct settlements and through the salaries that are paid to these officers.
And I apologize, we're at time for your testimony. I apologize. Is there any are there any questions for Ms. Ogle? Really want to thank you for your testimony and for sharing your experience with us. We deeply appreciate it. So that is our last testifier. Before, in a moment, I'm going to ask for a motion to approve the minutes for the May 19th meeting. But before I do, I want to briefly take the chair's privilege. I opened the newspaper a few days ago to read the quite alarming news that Kathy Wild was planning to retire as the leader of the New York City Partnership. And I have to say, I really can't imagine New York City without Kathy Wild as the chair of the New York City Partnership. I know there'll be many, I don't know if Kathy's still on the line. I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities to celebrate her incredible work on behalf of the city. I also do want to say, just personally, I'm just sort of deeply appreciative of her mentorship, guidance, leadership, brilliance. I don't always agree, but I always learn. And I'm sure there'll be many more opportunities to say that, but this is the first time I'm seeing you since I saw that news. I almost dropped my phone. And I could not let this opportunity pass for saying what I hope will be the first of many times. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. With you from Puerto Rico.
And I'm also, as always, jealous of you.
Yeah.
With that, I will entertain a motion to approve the minutes of the May 19th meeting. And with time to spare, happy to, in Kathy Wild's honor, entertain a motion to adjourn our meeting early. There a second? Thank you all so much. Thanks for being here. Thanks for being part of our democracy. Deeply appreciate it. Thank you.